Hi guys, so it's Friday and I said that I would try and do Daniel chapter 2 today, and so here I am. Daniel chapter 2 is amazing, and I just think where the action starts to happen and we start to see Daniel's true character come out, and it's just such an incredible step of faith and just act of boldness that we see in him. So just to give you a brief summary of the story, and I will try and stick to 5 minutes today. King Nebuchadnezzar has had this awful dream and no one can interpret it. He conjures up kind of magicians and interpreters and all of these various people, and nothing comes of it. No one can do it. And in fact we see kind of a worldly attitude from some people, which I'll address a little bit more later. So the king essentially goes crazy and he says, right, well, I've got to kill everyone. I've got to just get rid of the kingdom. I don't know what's to make of this dream. He's scared. He's acting in fear. And Daniel, in a very calm and measured way, asks what actually is going on. What's happening that's making the king so enraged? And that is when the king's servant Arioch says he's had this dream, he doesn't know what to make of it, he's scared, and so everyone's going to have to be killed. And Daniel says, right, I'll do it. I'll interpret the dream. At this point Daniel has no idea what the dream's about. So he runs to his friends and he says, I've told the king's servant rather, that I'm going to interpret the king's dream. I have no idea what the dream's about. You lot better pray. You lot better pray hard. And that's what happens. And lo and behold, Daniel's able to interpret the dream, and the king is just bowled over, and the chapter actually ends with King Nebuchadnezzar glorifying Daniel's God and saying how amazing it is, and it can be nothing other than a work of God. So just some key points from Daniel chapter 2, because I just think it's amazing. One of the key things is just Daniel's boldness. There's a worldly attitude, first and foremost, from the Chaldeans. It says, basically, the Chaldeans say, we can't interpret it, it's impossible. For man to do this, it's impossible. The only person that would be able to do this is of the gods, who is not with flesh. And that's what they say in Daniel chapter 2 from verse 10 to 11. And it's such a worldly attitude. And I think there's some learning there for us. We can think something's impossible. We can see something as difficult. And we can say, well, there's no point. No one can do it. If we struggle with something, if we think this is so difficult, I don't know how I'm ever going to get through this, we decide it's impossible. It can't be done because I can't do it. And that's what the Chaldeans are doing. They're saying, well, I don't know. But Daniel taps into a strength that's outside of himself, and we know that strength is of the Lord. And as soon as he does that, that's where things start to change. That's where action starts to take place, and we see boldness. I don't know whether you can see in the Bible here, I've just highlighted boldness. Like, I just think that it's so key. Daniel, he says, I'm going to interpret the dream and it's going to be fine. But the first thing he does is seek prayer. So that's the second point of learning. First point, just because we can't do it and we can't see how something can be done, it doesn't mean it's impossible. There is a God who can and will. The second point is that this boldness has to be backed up with prayer. Has to be backed up with prayer. He doesn't walk straight into King Nebuchadnezzar's room and say, right, I'm going to do this. He doesn't trust in himself. He trusts in his God. So he goes back to his friends and he says, guys, I'm going to interpret this dream and you need to pray. So point number 2, prayer. Prayer first before any big step, any step. Praying for God's mercy and grace over a situation. And then the third point, boldness. To then take that step of faith and be bold and say, this is what I believe the dream is about, or this is what I believe this situation is about, this is what I believe that this circumstance at my job is about, this is what I'm going to do about it, this is the action I'm going to take. And at that point, you're leaning on God's everlasting arms only. I think it's Psalm 46 verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I'm God." Sometimes we just have to stand in awe of the fact that God is God and he will do what he will. And that's what Daniel does. He's in awe of God. He worships God, he glorifies God in his everyday action and everyday life. And this is just another step in that is visible to other people. The chapter ends with Daniel being promoted. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel's God, and then promoted Daniel. And Daniel was then able to say, okay, but my friends, I want my friends in the kingdom with me. And so they're all promoted based on this step of faith and this leaning on God and this prayer and dependency. And that's Daniel chapter 2. And again, I'm over. Awful timekeeping, I'm so sorry. Tune in hopefully Monday next week for Daniel chapter 3. I'll try and do 2 a week. So Daniel chapter 4 will be next Friday. Thanks guys. Comments, feedback, subscribe. Bye.